Welcome again to Thoughts for Young Men. We're in chapter 4. We're now in the second section where we will get two other special rules for young men from J.C.Ryle. He writes, "For another thing, resolve never to forget the eye of God." The eye of God, think of that. Everywhere, in every house, in every field, in every room, in every company, alone or in a crowd, the eye of God is always upon you. The eyes of the Lord are in every place, beholding the evil and the good. And they are the eyes that read hearts as well as actions. Endeavor, I beseech you, to realize this fact. Remember that you have to deal with an all-seeing God, a God who never slumbers nor sleeps, a God who understands your thoughts afar off, and with whom the night shines as the day. You may leave your father's house and go away like the prodigal far into another country, and think that there is nobody to watch your conduct. But the eye and the ear of God are there before you. You may deceive your parents or employers. You may tell them falsehoods and be one thing before their faces and another behind their backs. But you cannot deceive God. He knows you through and through. He heard what you said as you spoke to people today. He knows what you are thinking of at this very minute. He has set your most secret sins in the light of his countenance, and they will one day come out before the world to your shame unless you take heed. How little is this really felt? How many things are done continually which men would never do if they thought they were seen? How many matters are transacted in the chambers of imagination which would never bear the light of day? Yes, men entertain thoughts in private, and say words in private, and do acts in private, which they would be ashamed and blush to have exposed before the world. The sound of a footstep coming has stopped many a deed of wickedness. A knock at the door has caused many an evil work to be hastily suspended and hurriedly laid aside. But oh, what miserable driveling folly all this! There is an all-seeing witness with us wherever we go. Lock the door, draw down the blinds, close the shutters, put out the light. It does not matter. It makes no difference. God is everywhere. You cannot shut him out or prevent his seeing. All things are naked and open to the eyes of him to whom we must give an account. Well did young Joseph understand this when his master's wife tempted him. There was no one in the house to see them, no human eye to witness against them. But Joseph was one who lived as seeing him that is invisible. How can I do this great wickedness, he said, and sin against God? Young man, I ask you to read Psalm 139. I advise you to learn it by heart. Make it the test of all your dealings in this world's business. Say to yourself often, do I remember that God sees me? Live as in the sight of God. This is what Abraham did. He walked before him. This is what Enoch did. He walked with him. This is what heaven itself will be, the eternal presence of God. Do nothing you would not like God to see. Say nothing that you would not like God to hear. Write nothing you would not like God to read. Go to no place where you would not like God to find you. Read no book of which you would not like God to say, "Show it to me." Never spend your time in such a way that you would not like God to have to say, "What are you doing?" For another thing, be diligent in the use of all public means of grace. Be regular in going to the house of God whenever it is open for prayer and preaching, and it is in your power to attend. Be regular in keeping the Lord's day holy, and determine that God's day out of the 7 shall hereafter always be given to its rightful owner. I would not leave any false impression on your minds. Do not go away and say that I told you that keeping your church duties made up the whole of true religion. I tell you no such thing. I have no wish to see you grow up as a formalist and a Pharisee. If you think the mere carrying of your body to a certain house at a certain time on a certain day in a certain week will make you a Christian and prepare you to meet God, I tell you flatly that you are miserably deceived. All services without heart service are unprofitable and vain. They are only the true worshippers who worship God in spirit and in truth. The Father seeks such to worship him. But means of grace are not to be despised because they are not saviors. Gold is not food. You cannot eat it, but but you would not therefore say it is useless and throw it away. Your soul's eternal well-being most certainly does not depend on means of grace, but it is no less certain that without them, as a general rule, your soul will not be well. God might take all who are saved to heaven in a chariot of fire as he did with Elijah, but he does not do so. He might teach them all by visions and dreams and miraculous interventions without requiring them to read or think for themselves, but he does not do so. And why not? Because he is a God that works by means, and it is his law and will that all man's dealings with him means shall be used. None but a fool or fanatic would think of building a house without ladders and scaffolding, and just so no wise man will despise means, especially when ordained by God. I dwell more on this point because Satan will try hard to fill your minds with arguments against the use of means. He will draw your attention to the numbers of persons that use them and are no better for the using. See there, he will whisper. Do you not observe that those who go to church are no better than those who stay away? But do not let this move you. It is never fair to argue against a thing because it is improperly used. It does not follow that means of grace can do no good because many attend on them and get no good from them. Medicine is not to be despised because many take it and do not recover their health. No man would think of giving up eating and drinking because others choose to eat and drink improperly, and so make themselves ill. The value of the means of grace, like other things, depends in great measure on the manner and spirit in which we use them. I dwell on this point, too, because of the strong anxiety I feel that every young man should regularly hear the preaching of Christ's gospel. I cannot tell you how important I think this is. By God's blessing, the ministry of the gospel might be the means of converting your soul, of leading you to a saving knowledge of Christ Jesus, of making you a child of God in deed and in truth. This would be cause for eternal thankfulness indeed. This would be an event over which angels would rejoice. But even if this were not the case, there is a restraining power and influence in the ministry of the gospel, under which I earnestly desire every young man to be brought. There are thousands whom it keeps back from evil, though it has not yet turned them unto God. It has made them far better members of society, though it has not yet made them true Christians. There is a certain kind of mysterious power in the faithful preaching of the gospel, which insensibly affects multitudes who listen to it without receiving it into their hearts. To hear sin cried down and holiness cried up, to hear Christ exalted and the works of the devil denounced, to hear the kingdom of heaven and its blessedness described, and the world and its emptiness exposed, to hear this week after week, Sunday after Sunday, is seldom without good effect to the soul. It makes it far harder afterwards to run into any excessive and riotous living. It acts as a wholesome check upon a man's heart. This, I believe, is one way in which that promise of God is made good. My word shall not return to me void. There is much truth in that strong saying of Whitefield. The gospel keeps many a one from jail and gallows, even if it does not keep him from hell. Let me here name another point which is closely connected to this subject. Let nothing ever tempt you to become a Sabbath breaker. I press this on your attention. Make conscience of giving all your Sabbath to God. A spirit of disregard for this holy day is growing up among us with fearful rapidity, and not at least among young men. Sunday traveling, Sunday visiting, Sunday outings are becoming every year more common than they were, and are doing infinite harm to souls. Young man, be jealous on this point. Whether you live in town or country, take a decided stand and resolve not to profane your Sabbath. Let not the plausible argument of needful relaxation for your body, let not the example of all around you, let not the invitation of companions with whom you may be thrown, let none of these things move you to depart from this settled rule, that God's day shall be given to God. Once you give up caring for the Sabbath, in the end you will give up caring for your soul. The steps which lead to this conclusion are easy and regular. Begin with not honoring God's day, and you will soon not honor God's house. Cease to honor God's house, and you will soon cease to honor God's book. Cease to honor God's book, and ultimately you will give God no honor at all. Let a man lay the foundation of having no Sabbath, and I am never surprised if he finishes with the topstone of no God. It is a remarkable saying of Judge Hale. Of all the persons who were convicted of capital crimes while he was upon the bench, he found only a few who would not confess, on inquiry, that they began their career of wickedness by neglect of the Sabbath. Young man, you may be thrown among companions who forget to honor the Lord's day, but resolve by God's help that you will always remember to keep it holy. Honor it by regular attendance at some place where the gospel is preached. Settle down under a faithful ministry, and once settled, let your place in church never be empty. Believe me, you will find a special blessing following you. If you call the Sabbath a delight, the holy day of your Lord honorable, and shall honor him, not doing your own ways, nor finding your own pleasure, nor speaking your own words, then you shall delight yourself in the Lord, and I will cause you to ride on in the high hills of earth. And one thing is very certain, your feelings about the Sabbath will always be a test and gauge of your fitness for heaven. They are a foretaste and a fragment of heaven. The man who finds them a burden and not a privilege may be sure that his heart stands in need of a mighty change.